I'm delighted to welcome you all tonight to this talk. My name is Nicola Jennings. I'm the director of the Athena Art Foundation. We are a charity which promotes engagement with pre-20th century art, but in doing that, we often talk to contemporary artists, as we're going to do tonight. We exist mainly on digital, online, but we do also occasionally host events in London and in New York, where I have a colleague that also has a branch of the Athena Art Foundation. We have a patrons group, we have a YouTube channel, we have a website which lists exhibitions about pre-20th century art all over the world. And we have quite a lot of resources. So please, digital resources, I mean, not financial resources, unfortunately. Um, but please check out our various platforms, and hopefully you'll find things that you like there. And one of the things that you will find is an interview that I did with the artist I'm going to be speaking to tonight, Volker Hermes, 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, I think it was. It was in June 2023, I believe. And it was lovely. It was Volker's first exhibition in London. So Volker, I'm going to hand over to James Freeman, the gallery owner, in a minute to tell us a little bit about the current exhibition, which is the second exhibition Volker has done at gallery. But let me just quickly introduce Volker first so that you know who he is. Volker is a German artist who trained at Düsseldorf's Art Academy, having exhibited paintings in galleries around the world for some 20 years. He reached a huge audience in recent years, especially for his hidden portrait series. And these are digital interventions into historical portraits that reconfigure textures and patterns from within the image to obscure the sitters' faces, which is a really fascinating concept. And the images are also very, very delightful. As I say, I first interviewed Volker 2 years ago, and today we're going to talk about the follow-up exhibition. And I'm going to ask James Freeman, the gallery owner, who's also with us tonight, to tell us a little bit about the exhibition that's on right now at his gallery, which pairs Volker with another artist, Derrick. So, James, welcome, and please tell us a little bit about the exhibition.
Many thanks, yes. The exhibition is called The Look, so it's a two-person exhibition. With Volker's work together with a Scottish artist called Derrick. Now, the focus of my gallery is what I call contemporary historicism. It's artists interpreting the present or the contemporary through the lens of art history. And obviously, Volker is a magnificent fit for that focus. And we had the first solo exhibition, which I must also point out, the connection was made by Nicola at the Athena Art Foundation. And so it's yet another string to your bow of what you do with the foundation in terms of your good work. Really what we've been looking for an opportunity to follow up on that with a new group of works, a new series of works, and particularly in this instance, all the works from Volker are based on self-portraits, which I'm sure you'll talk about. And this time we decided that it would be interesting to make it a two-person exhibition. A lot of galleries find that quite hard to do. I do quite a lot of two-person shows, and really it's a way of bringing artists that might not have shown together previously and helping expanding and kind of putting their work in new context. So in this instance, the idea of the show was all about the historical portrait, deconstructing the historical portrait and finding new ways to read into and understand historical portraiture, because I think with a contemporary eye, we understand portraits in a very particular way. Derrick is a Scottish artist. All of his work, he has these lover's eye paintings where he'll take the tradition of lover's eyes, these sort of very intimate sections of portraits, but it would just be an eye or a mouth that people would carry around with them. But he uses that to make reference to lots of different historical portraits in different countries and different eras. And so we have this two artists playing with the idea of deconstructing the kind of the established formal portrait and then using it to find a new way to read them and say, well, what did these portraits do? They weren't just a picture of a person and that person's story. And that's really what the show is about. And I think, that is, I think very much with Volker's work, that's a principal function of it, is to say, how should we look at historical portraiture? Let's try it. Let's find a new way of reading them and actually kind of reach back to the way that they were intended and find new ways of understanding them. So
Thank you. Great. Well, let me start the talk then with Volker. Volker, so lovely to see you again. And I'm sorry I missed the opening, but I was away, as you and James know. But I am going to be going in to have a look at the exhibition, and obviously I've seen the images online, and they look absolutely wonderful. So tell me a little bit about your general approach to the works that you've put into this exhibition.
Hello all. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this talk. What I thought about this kind of exhibition and this dual exhibition, and I thought that I could react on that by working only with self-portraits. How are artists or were artists showing themselves? And I found this really interesting because I never worked with self-portraits before. So it was the first time that I was diving into this kind of topic, into this very special corner of portraits. And I focused on several aspects that I found and I thought about, and made 6 works for this show, thinking about how artists see themselves and show themselves, which can be on different levels.
Because the whole issue, I mean, I can imagine, obviously I've never painted a self-portrait, but I imagine there's a whole series of questions the artist asks themselves, and takes quite a lot of trouble to think about, what pose am I going to be in? What costume am I going to wear? How am I going to wear my hair? Am I going to show the act of painting or of sculpting? And all those am I going to show the studio, as some artists have done? So it's really interesting. I mean, your focus is very much on costume, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing I think really drives your painting, your interest in these paintings. Am I right?
Yes, because this is a very precise decision of the persons that were depicted by other artists, or the artists what they're wearing by themselves. Because behind every self-portrait there is an intention. It's not made by accident. It's a bit like the selfies that you see today. They are most of the time the photo number 32. There were like 32 attempts before to get the very spontaneous selfie. And so these painted portraits, they took, of course, much longer, and there were a really precise intention behind it. And in this intention, you see where they were, about success, about self-confidence, or you see also some kind of psychological introspection, like where I am, or they know exactly where they are and they're showing their being proud of their situation. Or sometimes, and this is maybe a bit unknown part of self-portraits, they were made because it was commissioned by myself, so they could be kind of free. They were made to show skills. If you have guests in your studio and you want to have kind of self-marketing of your skills, you can have in your corner a kind of self-portrait, and okay, this I'm able to paint like this, without commissions, without any rules, you can present your skills. And I thought this is very, very interesting that you use your own image to show your skills.
Yeah.
As one part of the many intentions that can be found in these self-portraits.
Yeah, there's also the whole sort of self-fashioning of identity, isn't there? Of kind of, what kind of person, because I mean, I am an art historian of early modern art, and I know that one of the great concerns of painters was to show themselves as nobles as intellectuals rather than as craftsmen.
Yeah.
So how they dressed in their paintings was incredibly important. And, you know, the things that they surrounded themselves. Self-portraits are a really fascinating area of art history.
Yeah, you can really claim your position in society with a self-portrait. Like, this is where I see myself. Also in this kind, I mean, these are now earlier works in this very strict construction of commissions, where the people who were commissioned in portraits had a lot of rights, and there were huge contracts, what they want to see in this kind of portraits. So the artist could, yeah, really describe himself or herself in a yeah, in a work, in an artwork. And this is on top. These are wonderful paintings. You
Yeah.
know, it's like transformed into this beautiful art.
Do I remember correctly? I think we discussed which portraits we like best, self-portraits we like best when we spoke earlier. And we agreed that we really love Durer's self-portrait, where he presents himself really as Jesus Christ. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about Messiah complex or obsession, you know. I think that's right, isn't it? You also love that painting, am I right?
Yeah, yeah. This is one of my, I don't call it favorite. It's a kind of hero work. And every time I'm in Munich, I'm going there and just to see it. And if I don't have time, I jump into the museum and just stand in front of this work and leave the museum afterwards, because it's this
Yeah.
kind of very, like, painting. It's this kind of self-assurement, because he's so self-confident and he's so safe. And every time when I was very insecure in my life, I was really longing to see this work to get a kind of energy as an artist again.
It's interesting. I mean, the other thing, just before we move on to the specific works, that I think is interesting is I think a lot of artists do them when they're quite young, because they have, you know, they don't need to get a model. And they're also kind of trying to work out who they are, and you know, playing with their identities while they work that process out. I mean, obviously the greatest example is Rembrandt, isn't it, with all of those endless self-portraits, which are amazing, and the engraved self-portraits. But you don't work with those really famous paintings, do you? You don't tend to intervene with those, am I right?
No, I mean, from time to time, of course, I'm working with a kind of famous work, but not generally, because I think, you know, they are sometimes overseen, and, you know, not overseen, like too many people look at them all the time. And I want to show that in every corner of art history, there are like these brilliant works. And even if I work sometimes with paintings which are like maybe not the best paintings in art history, but they're showing so much about life and society, and they're so wonderful and so warm. And so I don't want to jump only on these famous things. I want to work with all the other works too.
Actually, it also performs quite a great function, because I mean, there was an article in, I think it was the Art newspaper, that I read this week or last week, by somebody who was complaining about the fact that there are so many paintings in gallery stores that we never ever see, because the space on the walls is taken up by the very famous painters. And yet there are so many painters who are not quite so famous, but who painted really fantastic works. So you're actually showing us things that we might not see otherwise, which is great.
Yeah, and being famous is also like, I mean, Rembrandt is now an example who's like famous for a long time, and he will be. But some other painters were famous for a short time, and then all their works came out of fashion and they were never seen again. And we still have that today, that some works are just not what is seen in the society. So they are all in these storages, and nobody sees them. And it is a kind of pity that so
Yeah, and I
many.
love it. Sorry.
Yeah, there's so many so many artworks can't be shown, but of course everything needs space, and we don't have so much space to show all the artworks that survived over the years.
The great thing about digital is you can do more of that, can't you? But anyway, let's get on to your works. And I want you to tell me a little bit more about them. So this one, tell me about this hidden Van de Ven. Van de Ven, is that how you pronounce it? Venne? Venne?
Yeah, Van der Venne, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about self-confidence, and when I saw it it's in the collection of the Mauritshuis, and I really had to laugh, to be honest, and because I thought for the first second that he's showing his muscle. I mean, like scratching his arm muscle, and I thought, like, this is an attitude for an artist, like having this pose, and I really loved it. It's probably not that, but he's showing this really magnificent fabric of his coat. And so it's really a kind of very self-confident and status work. And then I looked at it, and usually I tend to work with the ruff, and I thought, but this time I want to work with the cuffs, because it's such a delicate fabric. You can see that this fabric is almost transparent. And this is like this is the finest linen you can find. And he's more or less presenting the cuffs like with this gesture. And so I took the parts of the cuff and did this overlaying ribbons over his huge hat, which is also a really kind of sign. He's more or less dressed like one of his clients. He's really trying to put himself in this kind of wealth situation. And I wanted to add a really like another layer on it and put his very slightly arrogant view behind this kind of curtain, and touching this ribbon made of this very precious fabric is like this kind of, yeah, this kind of self-assurance, like I am in this position. And so I did this ribbons, which seemed very easy, but it took me ages to get them over this hat. And yeah, and then they're pointing on the fabric so that people can see, okay, this fabric of this coat is also like, wow, this is really, really great.
I want to ask you a little bit about the technical process that you said took you hours to do in a minute. But first of all, I want to say the other thing that's so great about your work is it's quite humorous. You know, it makes us laugh, and I think that's really nice too. You know, we're delighted by it. I think I used the word delightful when I introduced your work earlier. You know, that I find them delightful because they always make me smile. You know, and you know, that's often, I mean, sometimes they're a little bit tragic. I think some of the ones of women where, you know, they're in these ruffs that are sort of up to here, and then you put the ruff right over their head. I mean, that's a kind of, we can talk about that a bit later, you know, and that's, I think, a comment on the situation of women in that particular society. But with something like this, you know, he does look kind of ridiculous, doesn't he? I mean, you have to smile.
Yeah, but you know, this is also a comment on this very self-confident artist. And you see them all over the time, this kind of artists who do, you know, there are still artists in this world, but they have this kind of, they're showing off, you know, you see them all the time, and they're presenting a kind of show. And I think this is also a show, but at that time, and to insecure him a bit, to make him a bit insecure. This is this kind, but not in a, you know, I don't want to be aggressive, but you can smile over his attitude now. And then this is the ironic twist that I'm saying, okay, this is a very self-confident artist. And yeah.
I mean, his costume is amazing, and he's also obviously showing the clients, look at what I can do with black, because they all wore black at this point. You know, that was the sort of you know, the dress code is that you weren't supposed to flaunt, you know, black was the sober thing, and all you could do was have a bit of decoration on the black. So he's showing us, look, you know, I've got the decoration on this sleeve, and then I've got, you know, the sort of gilet thing that I'm wearing, that's made of something slightly different, and it's got kind of raised bits on it, and then it's got these tiny little buttons, these sort of covered
Yeah.
buttons, and then, as you say, these beautiful cuffs, and the ruff, which is extraordinary, which would have been tied on, right, somehow, I think.
Yeah. It's
And
tied
then,
on
of
the
course,
back.
the hat as well.
Yeah, and the hat was in a Dutch society, in a Flemish society, a very important item. You see a lot of hats like this kind of beaver fur hats, and they were amazingly expensive, but everybody wants to have this kind of hat. So this is also a statement, and this little fabric flower on it, or
Yeah,
decoration.
on the hat, yes.
So
yeah.
he's really coquettish, and
Yeah.
I really love it.
Yeah, the coquettish is the right word. I think the thing that makes me laugh more than anything is the expression on his face.
Yeah.
I am so handsome.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next. I mean, we will, by the way, there'll be time for questions at the end. So if anybody wants to ask questions about any of these paintings or about Volker's work in general, or ask James something, there'll be time for questions at the end. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so she is a wonderful painter. I love Sofonisba Anguissola. So she was a painter at the Spanish court. She was Italian, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah,
And then
she's
she
Italian.
went to Spain.
Yeah.
As a kind of lady in waiting, I think, to the Spanish queen.
Yes.
And then she painted some portraits for them. And she was a wonderful, wonderful painter.
Yeah,
But tell me
completely
about
amazing.
Yeah, tell me about this, why you chose to paint her.
Yeah, in this case, it's not, it's not really a covering. I always call these works complications. I add some complications in these works. And complicated is maybe a description for almost every female artist at that time, because they were not really allowed to be a painter, and they were not allowed to do this kind of anatomical sketches, and they didn't have access to the academies and all this thing. So the life as a female painter was long time very complicated. And when you see, she did quite a lot of self-portraits, and all these self-portraits are very serious. Like, she really wanted to point out, like, I'm a serious person. I'm a wonderful painter, but I'm serious. It's not, I'm not daughter of who's doing some flower watercolors for fun. I'm a serious artist. And so this kind of very complicated structure I want to add in a kind of very graphic way, because I thought this line or brushstroke in a work is where you really feel the artists, because you can see this line maybe with a pencil, and then you see the pencil, and on the other side of the pencil you see the artist. This is how I'm standing in front of paintings, that I feel so connected when I see these pencil lines or brushstrokes. And then I decided to take this kind of ribbons that she has on her blouse and wrap them around her, but in a kind of graphic way, like she would like scratch on this work. And I remember when I'm painting and something is very complicated, and sometimes I lose my nerves and I take a brush and then I do it exactly like this. And I thought this is a kind of very fitting way to deal a self-portrait of this particular artist.
Yeah, I think she's also hinting, isn't she, at the constraints of her position, because I feel, I mean, I'm a bit claustrophobic, and I feel that if I had such a high collar that was all tied up like that, quite tightly at the neck, I would find that really very uncomfortable. I don't, that I can, it almost makes me feel a bit, like it's constricting. So I wonder if subconsciously she's kind of telling us that, or maybe even consciously.
I mean, the whole fashion code at the Spanish court was the opposite of comfortable. It was it was a very harsh system, and all the clothes were not comfortable, and you know, nobody was at this court to feel comfortable. So maybe this is one part of the fashion that she had to wear, also with these kind of very decent colors. But you're right, it doesn't feel like I'm a free artist and I love jumping around. And that's why I also, you know, when I do this kind of ribbons, I try to give them a start at the painting itself. So from this kind of things, start my ribbons, and then you can follow them, and it's really they're really connected also on the backside. So it really makes sense in a way. It's not only like a decoration, it really makes sense. These ribbons are really wrapped around her.
Yeah. I was just trying to look at the signature. I mean, it's significant that she signs the painting because not all painters did that. So, you know, she's very much making a statement.
I didn't check it out, but because in Spain she was not really allowed to sign because she was at the court. But so I don't really know whether when this work started. But she signed in other works. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. Okay, well let's move on to the next one. I love this one. So I've never heard of this chap, Valorant Valiant.
Yeah. You never heard of it? He's a wonderful painter.
He is a wonderful painter, but that's exactly what I mean. You know, he's probably, I mean, maybe that the National Gallery has a painting by him or the National Portrait Gallery that's hidden somewhere in the stores, but I've never seen a painting. I mean, that's not to say it's not there. I've never seen that name.
Yeah, he did wonderful paintings, and I mean, obviously he's a really handsome guy, and he knows it, you know, even a bit more as the Van der Venne. And when I first, you know, had a glimpse at this work, I thought it's like 19th century Orientalism, something like that. But it's not. It's much earlier. And there were from time to time fashions that influences when some countries were like found, or some new routes of trading were made, and then suddenly, you know, porcelain from China came over, so they start dressing as they thought they look in China. And it's a bit like this. It's now 17th century, and at that time the Dutch society was a lot trading with Oriental countries, and all the, you know, the tapestry, the carpets, they were all, you see it in a lot of paintings. So it's on one hand a sign like, I'm really cool, I know what's coming from other countries, but also it's amazingly expensive to wear this kind of fabrics in this huge turban around him. So there are two things about the self-portrait, that he really wears this precious fabric, and on the other hand is like, okay, I know what's going on. I'm really on the heights of discussion in our country. And I gave this turban a kind of different life. It's really alive. It's really it's taking over all this different, and yeah, it happens when you cover the eye half, it's kind of brutal, you know. This handsome guy has a really kind of very cold and brutal gaze, and I was really a bit shocked recognizing that when I covered half of it, and I really wanted to keep it, because what we see now is a very handsome guy, and then we leave more or less, and I wanted to add this kind of layer of kind of, yeah, being, maybe it's brutal, not the right word, but he's kind of, there's a kind of dark heart in his eyes. It's not only friendly.
They're very cold, aren't they, his eyes?
Yes.
Yeah. But I think it's true. I mean, it's really beautiful, and it's beautifully painted. Gosh, that silk, that shot silk, the ends of the turban, that scarf that he's got wrapped around him, that you see sort of hanging down. It's amazing. Really, really beautiful. And also the kind of satin, I think it must be some kind of satin you know, that his jacket is painted in. But in your work, the turban wears him. He's not wearing the
Yeah,
turban.
exactly. Yeah, I wanted to have, this, this kind of arches that parts of the fabrics make. I thought in between I was like, okay, it looks like snakes coming out of this turban, and it's really that this kind of fashion item takes over.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that it's not that you thought that it would be sort of Orientalist, but it's earlier. But I think there was already a sort of sense of kind of looking at the Orient as this sort of fantasy world where, people were sort of deprived of agency. They became kind of ciphers for beautiful things and for, for exotic stories. And so I when I first saw your painting, I thought maybe it was a kind of saying, well, I'm going to have the last laugh because you may be depriving these people of agency, but I'm going to do the same thing to you in a way. I'm going to make you the subject of my Orientalist painting, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a difference in the earlier time, but I'm not an art historian. It's just my view. It's like in the first time it was connected to items, to things that brought
no,
over.
that's true.
And in the 19th century, it was more of an idea of an ideal or something like that. It was not so connected to a carpet or something like that. It was a kind of place where you want to go and where things are different or something.
Yeah. And he is very handsome, and it is rather wonderful. So where did he come from, Valiant? Was he Belgian or French?
Yeah, Belgium.
He's Belgian, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe I have heard of him, but no, he's fantastic. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Oh, this is lovely. The Vigée Lebrun. So tell us. I mean, she's kind of the best known, I would say, apart from Sophonisba, but maybe Vigée Lebrun is the best known of the artists whose works you have today. I mean, there's a very beautiful Vigée Lebrun hanging in the National Gallery in London, at least one. There might be more than one. And she was the portraitist. She was the painter to Marie Antoinette, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And a very high society elite, sort of the painter to the aristocracy and nobility in France at the end of the 18th century.
I think the image of Marie Antoinette that we know is made by Vigée Lebrun. The main images that we know, she created the image of Marie Antoinette. So she was a very important figure and a beautiful and wonderful painter. And she painted a lot of other people from the noble class, but of course she's known for her connection to Marie Antoinette. And I really wanted to work with this work, and it was kind of problematic because I asked at the Kimball Art Museum to get the file because it was not in open access, and I really had to apply for it, and I had to to write a kind of essay about my intentions, and this was kind of funny, and I'm happy that they approved my ideas at the end, and I got the file. And now they're very happy about it, by the way.
Are they?
Yes, they told me I've sent them. And I really wanted to work with this portrait because for us, she looks like a really healthy and cute country girl, something with this hat and this one single feather and this kind of simple dress. But in fact, it's the opposite. And because this white muslin dress was the top of the fashion, you can't imagine what kind of top this was, because the whole aristocracy was wearing silk, French silk, and there was a whole industry to produce these fabrics. And then Marie Antoinette made connection to her inner nature, and she thought that a white muslin dress would be really cool. And only a few people were really wearing this very simple dress. It was made of all cotton, and this was really expensive, so it was not really simple. But for us, and this is what I want to point out, is that for us, the image of this work is not what it really means, because she's showing herself as an it girl, and also with this kind of simple hat. And I wanted to recreate this kind of image of this grand entrance, and to point on these huge wigs that were very in fashion at that time, and create only from her sash and from her bow this kind of huge ribbon explosion on her head, to give her this kind of, yeah, I'm a grand lady. And this very cute earring is at the end very precious, so I multiplied it and hang it like a curtain in front of her face to tell you, okay, it's not a simple earring. It's kind of precious.
It almost has a sound, that painting. You can kind of imagine all the little earrings kind of tinkling.
Yeah.
And
Yes, right.
yeah. And again, the red ribbon comes around her neck. I'm a little bit obsessed about sort of things getting wrapped around your neck.
Yeah, I think, what, you look in the faces, but what's on the backside? And this is a big mystery in portraits. What is on the backside of the persons? And if and the whole three-dimensional aspect of a body, and if you wrap a ribbon around it, you grab the whole body, and you make clear that this is not a two-dimensional thing like a painting. It's actually showing a three-dimensional body.
Mm.
And this ribbon is the easiest thing to get this kind of behind the figure. And sometimes I wrap ribbons also around chairs and columns and drapery to get these persons into the room, into the space.
So how do you tell me a little bit how you actually do your intervention? I mean, is there a sort of simple explanation, or is it fantastically complex?
No, I mean, the technical thing is explained quite easily. I grab parts of the work and I really cut it out. It's really manual. I'm using a mouse. Like, I don't know, maybe you can see it. It's like I don't have any fancy material. I'm using a mouse, cutting things out, and then reshaping them into something else and put them somewhere else on the painting. This is the general concept. Where it's complicated is that painting is not really functioning in clear lines. So you have to find a lot of different layers over each other that are half transparent to get a kind of painted line, for example. So this is what I found out by teaching myself Photoshop, is how can I actually do it and use Photoshop, I think, very, very differently than the professional people do it.
Yeah, because I imagine it's really, I mean, what you do is brilliant, and that it really does feel three-dimensional. You can imagine those ribbons going behind her head and coming back the other side, and they come out towards us, don't they? I mean, like those earrings, they project.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is, I'm dealing with painted reality, not with reality. So it's completely different when you edit a photo of a real photo of a person in a room, or if you edit a painting, because the painting is already a transcription of reality. It's showing us something, and you must know how it works. And I know it because I'm a painter. So you know how the dark parts work in opposite to the brighter parts, and you know what you have to do to make ribbons go in the background, like the tricks that you do as a painter to make things appear three-dimensional.
Which has always been the challenge, hasn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
It's much easier to paint abstract.
Yeah. And of course, these are things which you know about because you started as a painter, and that's your training, and you come to this whole thing with very much with a painter's sensibility, I think, which is what.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a painter, and I really, because everything I do, I think about it. like painting. I'm not painting these, but I mean, it's still the topic of painting.
Yeah.
And I think we have to loosen up these borders between, you know, we think in this kind of this is this and this is that. And but this is another discussion.
But it's interesting you said that you had to kind of really convince the Kimball to let you. I mean, have you found that curators are open to looking at these paintings? And I mean, I know you've had a great success in terms of people buying your works, people loving your works, and you know, but I'm wondering about curators are possibly of what we used to call old master collections, but these pre-modern collections can be a little bit kind of protective about their works, can't they? I mean, I know that, for example, you're not allowed to buy an image of the National Gallery paintings and do things with them. You can't crop them, you can't, you know, you can't stretch them. You know, there are very strict rules as to what you can do even digitally, you know. I mean, have you found that this is an issue?
It is always an issue. But for example, I worked with a lot of portraits from National Gallery, and I was invited by the National Gallery. So the things are changing a bit because the works are free, because the rights of the works are given to us, to all the people on the world. And of course, there are a lot of people in museums who are a bit skeptical about my technique. But in my experience is, after telling them the reasons and also like showing them the originals, like that they are really make clear that these are thoughts on paintings and are not like repainting things, then it's getting much, much better. But you have to have the chance to talk to them. And this is sometimes complicated. And some museums are so conservative, and they don't give access to their files. And this is happening. And for example, it took me, I had a lovely project in Venice, and it took me 8 months discussion with a German museum to give me a file, which is common free, you know, and because some of them are also scared that there is another form of interpretation. You know, all these specialists are talking about these works, and they have their solution why things are like this. And if artists come and say, maybe it's different because I see it this way, then they're a bit scared maybe about their whole life structure, like. But this is changing. For example, I was in New York, and I met a curator from the Frick collection, and the Frick collection is very strict in their policy of images. But at the end, it was really nice, and we were still in contact. Because it was clear that I'm not a fear for these works. I'm really trying to open up the views for people.
Yeah, well, I think it's great. I mean, in terms of what we believe in with Athena, the Athena Art Foundation, it's very much about looking for new ways to engage people, because a lot of people will never go into a gallery, and they won't even look at paintings online. They'll just say, that's not for me, those are brown paintings, it's got nothing to do with my life today. And I think that's particularly the case with some younger people who've never had any education about what these paintings are, or they haven't been taken to a gallery, and so I think trying to find new ways to lead people in and to get them looking at things is what we need to do. So I really applaud what you do.
What I felt at the beginning is that the museum people think, okay, if we start presenting our works online, nobody will visit our museum anymore. And this is not true. The opposite is the case. The people engage with artworks online, and they know exactly that this is just an online form. They don't think this, nobody thinks that this is now the artwork. of course, the ultimate experience is always standing in front of this painting, and this is something completely different.
Yeah.
But it often starts online now and then ends in the museum. And this is also what I encourage, like, visit the originals.
I think more and more curators are understanding that digital can be a way of developing your audience. That's really what digital is very useful for. Anyway, I think we should call our discussion to an end and open the floor to questions.
Yes,
because I'm sure people will like to ask questions. I'm going to ask my colleague Abigail to tell us if there are any questions. So you can put your questions in the comment box, or you could raise your hand. We might not see you, so sometimes the comment box is more effective. So please ask us questions, or ask Volker and James questions. Abigail, are there any questions there?
Nothing just yet.
James, is there anything else you wanted to add to the conversation?
I could
Having
add
listened
to
to
the conversation, everything you talk about, I could be, giving extra aspects to it. I think it's very interesting, particularly what you were talking about there, in terms of how, what Volker was saying in terms of the fear of museums thinking that the digital experience would somehow minimize their importance. I have found absolutely the opposite. If you make the effort, if you make the effort and actually project what you're doing online, obviously so many people, we spend so much time online, the vast majority of us now, even if we don't intend to, it's unintentional. So if you can actually properly engage people and make them look at what you're doing, years ago, let's call it 7-8 years ago, people wouldn't necessarily look at that much online. Then they'd come along to my gallery, to my exhibitions, and they'd find out about it just by walking into the gallery. Now what I have is people do a lot of their research in advance. So they'll read up about what the exhibition is about. They'll read up about the artist. They'll know what artworks they're expecting to see, so that then once somebody arrives and physically comes into the gallery, they're already pre-informed. So it's a much deeper and much richer experience, to be perfectly honest. But it is all about how you do it and how you use it. And so I find that personally, somebody who does lots of exhibitions and works with lots of artists, I find that very satisfying, and it's something I do think museums are very well into that at this stage. I can't think of that many places. Well, I was having to research some collections, in mainland Europe recently, where I looked at their websites and I thought, my goodness, you're missing a trick with the collections that you have here. But it's to do with resources, I suppose. Yeah. But most large museums, I think, understand this very well by now.
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions yet, Abigail?
No, if you want to put any in the chat, they can type, or if you want to just speak.
Well, it's nearly 10 to 7, so I would say if there aren't any questions, raise your hand now or speak now or forever hold your peace. But otherwise, I'm going to
Oh, we've got a comment from Jane, not quite a. She says, apologies for joining late. So interesting. We'll enjoy the whole when it's up in recording. We're hoping to put it up early next week sometime. We'll
late next week, probably.
Late next week, sorry.
Yes.
And we'll get something out on the Instagram to say about that. And she says, listening to you talk about the ribbons in the Elizabeth Berger-Lebrun work makes me realize that all your works add so much 3D to the paintings.
Yeah, it's a kind of topic in my thoughts. This kind of showing that there is a body. It's not just a flat thing, and that you go behind. Also, the mystery that what's behind is maybe a short story. I was working in a workshop for opera costumes years ago, and they made these historical costumes for operas. And the start was always a drawing by the costume designer, and this drawing was only the front. And then this costume workshop had to think about the back. And this really impressed me that, only we know how it looks on the front, but how it looks in the back. And this, I'm thinking about that a lot because I really want to make sure that there was also a lot going on also in the costumes on the backside.
I really enjoyed the Sargent exhibition, I think, at the Tate last year, with so many of the dresses or similar dresses to those that were worn in the paintings. Again, it kind of gives you a sense of that 3D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have a special own life in Sargent's work.
Oh, he's brilliant, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Volker. Thank you, James. And thank all the attendees. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think it was a really super interesting conversation. It will go up on YouTube soon. And you can, as I say, you can find, I think you should be able to find my last conversation with Volker there. So, and please join us for other conversations in the future. We usually hold these about once a month. There's going to be one, I think, on the 2nd of July, which is going to be really interesting. Abigail is doing that. Abigail, do you want to say what it is, just so that the...
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking to the curator at Compton Verney, which is a collection of museums. And we're going to be talking specifically about one painting, which was a really interesting acquisition. And it's called Two Women Wearing Cosmetic Patches. And if you scroll down on the Athena Instagram page, you can find a little post we did about just introducing you to it as a bit of a teaser. But yeah, so that should be really great, hopefully.
That's a fascinating painting. That'd be.
It really is, yeah.
I remember when it came up at auction, and it came up for quite a low estimate, and then everybody went absolutely mad for it. And it'd be interesting to see, because the interpretations even now still keep changing in terms of what they think it was, what it's really saying, what it's all about.
I mean, it's fascinating. I think the fact that it's probably an allegory really adds to that. But we'll talk about this in the event.
It's getting carried away here, but that will be very, very interesting. So.
Yeah. And then we have another one towards the end of July about the fabulous Siena exhibition at the National Gallery, which came also from New York. So very, very different kind of work, but also very beautiful, and also full of some of the objects that Volker was talking about, the beautiful carpets and silks, textiles, and all that sort of thing. So there are links between all these things. Anyway, thank you everybody very much, and have a lovely evening, and goodbye.
Thank you.